You are in for an interesting ride.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ET Newsroom. I'm your host, Joanna Summerscales, and my guest is Barbara Eberhardt. Barbara is 80 years old, spent most of her life working in the banking industry. She was married and had a son and lived a lot of her life in Northern California, as well as having traveled the world when she was married, or at least different parts of it. When Barbara called me, she said, well, you know what, Joanne, I really think it's time I tell my story. And she said, not least because I'm 80 years old now. Well, it's not the first time I've had somebody from that neck of the woods on the age scale contact me, but not recently. And when Barbara told me her story, I have to say, I was intrigued. Around 75 years old, so around about 2019, possibly the end of 18, she had a download. Prior to the download, so for 75 years, Barbara believed we cannot be alone in this universe or many multiverses. She had no special interest in the field of ufology, ETs, aliens, anything else you like to call them. So it was a huge shock for her when, during this download, she found out that she had been taken all her life. Now, for those of you who know the book 44, based on an ex-soldier's true story of lifelong events involving contact and alien abduction, that's with Bill Brooks, also known as Mike Smith. And he was 44 when he had his download. But before that time, he would have thought people like me were a bit of a fruitcake, as he said to me once. The shock for both of them was huge. We're going to hear Barbara's story. And I think that you are going to be absolutely intrigued because not only has she been taken, but she's now working with them. And then you'll find out now who that is. Stay tuned, pin back your ears, get a drink, get the popcorn, fasten your seatbelts. Hello, everyone. We've got Barbara Eberhardt with us, and I'm really excited for what she has to share with you.
Well, my name is Barbara Eberhardt. I'm 80 years old now. I lived for a long time here in Northern California, and I came to Germany last summer because my son lives here. Until 5 years ago, I had no idea that I was actually in contact with extraterrestrials, mainly Pleiadians, since I was 3 years old. It happened 2018. I was visiting here in Germany with the in-laws of my son. My son and my daughter-in-law were there too. And one night, went to bed, and I had a download. Means one picture after another, very intense. I was in them all. I was acting in them, very concentrated, putting a thread through a needle. The next thing I knew, I was galloping with a horse over a plain. The next thing, I was forging metal. I was underwater. I was in the universe. I was in the jungle. I was in the desert. It was crazy, and I couldn't stop.
Past life memories that were just absolutely shuddering through.
Could very well be. I don't know what it was. And so eventually I must have blacked out. And I called my son over and spoke down and cried. And I don't cry very easily, really. He was flying back to California 4 days later, and I had still 3 weeks planned. So I canceled everything because I thought I was going nuts. I really thought it was my brain. I was going crazy. Went home with him, lived in Northern California in the Redwoods. And I had 5 acres there, and I had just remodeled my home, everything for old age. I was going to die on that property. It was beautiful, and as I came back from Germany with my son, I walked on the property and said, I'm going to sell the property and move to the list. Calm down. No idea where that thought came from.
Can we just say where you were in Northern California?
Yeah, a little town called Laytonville on Highway 101. So it's highway going north-south.
And this property was your retirement place,
Yeah.
what it was, wasn't it?
Well, I have been living on it for over 20 years, so and it was beautiful. And I had no, but when I walked on it, I said, I'm going to sell the property and move to the next town down, which is Willits. I didn't hear that. I was convinced that's what I had to do. And so the next week, I went down and applied for an apartment in the senior housing area. After 20 years living on the property, a lot of stuff too late. Yeah, and so I started doing the whole process. Next year in 2019, I got an apartment and I moved in at the end, towards the end of April. Somehow along the way, I had signed up for Contact in the Desert. It's a big UFO conference. I have to say this. I knew there were UFOs. I knew we were not alone in the universe, but I was never really that interested in it. Actually, I've seen things a couple times that are in the sky, but it was not something that occupied my mind very much at all. Until this day, I had no idea how I signed up for this. I cannot remember what triggered it. That was at the end of May. So then I ordered some books at Amazon. And then one book kind of jumped out on me. It was called Chosen by Yvonne Smith. And it was interesting. I said, okay, that sounds interesting. Put it in the basket. That was the first one I read. Yvonne Smith is a hypnotherapist that has been working with abductees for over 30 years. Towards the end of the book, there was a couple of people that said, well, he had this download. And this one guy said, I had this download. After that, I had to sell my property and move to another town. That was my big aha moment. Oh, that's exactly what happened to me. Oh my gosh. It was amazing, what goes on in your head all of a sudden. Wow, bang. and then I contacted Yvonne, and she was actually a speaker at the Contact in the Desert. So we hooked up there, and after that, I went straight to her. After the I went to her office, and the next couple of days, I had a hypnotic regression with her because I wanted to find out what happened there. Yeah, and that's how it started.
Before you went to have any sessions with Yvonne Smith, after the download and this rush of different images, wanting to move to a senior supported apartment in Willits from your beautiful property that you'd already remodeled for your older years, was there anything else from that download? Did nothing happen until you began having regression sessions with Yvonne?
Except for that signing up for Contact in the Desert, which I have no idea why I did that. I don't know, it just, but everything went kind of really smooth, my selling the property and getting everything done. And not really. I can't really say that anything unusual. Everything was just falling into place. You know what I mean? Yeah, now I know it probably was orchestrated. It smoothed the way for me.
What was the outcome of your first regression? And I know you've had about 20 so far.
My first, Yvonne told me the first time we do a regression. So she said we have to kind of crack that. So the first regression is normally very kind of fuzzy. Don't expect too much. And so it was really interesting because the first one I was lying on something, and a huge figure leaned over me, and I couldn't see very clearly at all. It was just like a big shadow figure that leaned over me. And eventually I was put on my feet, and then I started walking, and I felt hands on both sides, little hands that guided me. So that was basically the first thing that I experienced there.
And did that seem to unlock the beginnings of some of the memories?
Well, I went back to Yvonne then 6 weeks later, and then I had my another second and third session is in a row. The second session, we went to the same day and time, and then all of a sudden it was very clear. We really cracked the case, my blockage open, and I was shocked. And then I found out that the being that leaned over me was a reptilian. I was, I did not expect that at all. It was really a shock. But he was very gentle and very, and the thing was, I wasn't afraid. I was shocked knowing that it was a reptilian. But there, I was not afraid at all. And he kind of examined me, not just looked over me, and then was put on my feet, and then two little grays came and took me right and left. And there was also a Pleidian lady there.
So I remember you saying that you were about 5'7", Barbara. So
Yeah, I'm about 5'7", so she was about 6 feet, and she was all in white, and she had white straight hair and elongated face. She was always there on my left side. So we walked the long hallway down with those little grays leading me, and we came into a room where the whole wall was like a screen. And there I got my download. And there was a very, very tall Pleiadian standing there. He might have been 7 feet tall because he was very tall and was kind of in charge of
could
everything.
you say what that being looked like? This very tall 7'1"? Was it
Yeah, it was a Pleiadian. He was also kind of white. And they're all very pale because they don't have any sunlight up there, right? And and so also white hair straight down, and they all have their hair cut shoulder length. All of them. There's nothing like a ponytail or anything like that. But yeah, and he was standing there. He didn't say anything, and he was standing there observing. But I was standing and watching. And the thing was, at that time, when I got that download, there was pictures of the desert, and there was a row of trees in the background. And there was one picture that was like the jungle. And it was beautiful, lush green. And I just stepped one step forward, and all of a sudden I was in that jungle. I feel all the foliage around me. But then I noticed it was very, very quiet. I couldn't hear anything in there. Not a single living creature was. Not even a little mosquito or a little fly or a little bug. Nothing. That was really strange.
Do you think that might have been a hologram?
I don't know. I have no idea what it was. I just stepped forward, and all of a sudden I was in that green. And then I stepped back, and I was out again, out of the picture. And then after that, we explored a few things. This main session that I knew that I was really taken. One thing that came out a little bit like a video, if you wanted to call it that. I was standing, it was like settlement, adobe houses. People were running back and forth, and there were huge cubes flying, like a square, yeah. They didn't have any markings or any windows or anything like that, just really just like a cube. Flying and big ones, and they weren't doing anything, they weren't shooting or anything like that, nothing like that, but the people were all afraid and running around. And there was, on the right-hand side of me, there was a woman sitting in the corner of a house and shielding her, had like a little toddler and then a baby in her arms. I was just observing. It was really strange.
And did you have a sense of an era, a time?
No, I couldn't really, and I don't even know if it was on our planet. I have no idea. I have no idea why this was sent, why I was seeing this. Yeah, the next session I said I would like to find out when this started. And at that time, I was 3 years old, and I was born in 1943, so that was right at the end of the war, 1946. We were living in a little village at the edge of Germany, and we were in the Russian zone. After the war, we were divided into 4 zones: American, the French, the British, and the Russian. And we were living in the Russian zone. Our village had actually, the road that went through the village was the old salt route going down into the Mediterranean. So the Russian soldiers, they came all on that. And so the women always had to hide.
Russian soldiers came down that salt road?
Yeah, because it's through the mountains, Well, the women had to hide when they came to hide, yes. And they came and they brought the pox. We called them the Russian pox because we brought them. And
yeah, so this wasn't chicken pox, it was just known as the Russian pox.
It was a very aggressive pox that left those deep scars, And my mother, she was a nurse, and she said, don't scratch, don't scratch. And so I was standing in the middle of the night, I was standing in my little crib and waving my nightgown so the fresh air would take the itch a little bit. And all of a sudden there was see the light from the outside, I could see it like a round orb. And it came through the window, kind of stopped in front of me, and 2 beings materialized behind it. And I couldn't quite see them. They were not very tall, so they must have probably been grays, I assume now. I couldn't quite see what they were because the light was in front of me. And then they had a black box that had a green and a strip of green light and a strip of red light on it, and the lights were flashing. So I thought that was, under hypnotic repression, you're like 3 years old, "Yeah, this is fun, And with that box, they went over my whole body. They just took it and went over my body, and I had to turn around and look back, and then after they were done, and I thought it was so much fun. So after they were done, they kind of scooped back up into the orb, and the orb went through the window again, was gone. But the next morning, my mother, when she checked me out, she said, "Wow, my fever had broken, and I was starting to heal." But it was very painful and very itchy, and like I said, you're not supposed to scratch. That was my first contact with them. They came and healed me. So then we went to different times during my childhood. They had taken me. Like one time I was maybe about 7, something like that. We were given blocks, building blocks.
There were also other children there. And then,
Yeah.
as you said,
There were always about around 8 to 10 kids, different kids. That's when the first time I saw a black kid. Never seen a black kid before. And there was also one kid that had a tail. He must have been a hybrid somehow. But we thought it was fascinating. Somebody with a tail.
Did he look human apart from his tail?
Yeah, but he had a kind of like a little bit greenish colored skin and no hair. But he was really nice also. We all played together, and there was one girl, I call her Curly because she had very curly hair, brown curly hair. And we kind of hooked up, and every time we were up there, we were always together, trying to do things together. So that time we had those blocks, and every side of the block had a sign on it, and we had to figure out at the sign at one place it went to the edge of the block, and we had to find another block and another sign that would fit right on it. So we had to connect those signs, and
were they like symbols, Barbara, or were they?
Yes, symbols. Yes.
Okay, so the blocks have different symbols on them, and you were tasked with matching them. Is that
Yes, we were trying to match them.
A bit like a Lego.
I made a little drawing of it, like one of the blocks. It was kind of like an H, it looked like, and then the thing went to the side. But yeah, then we had to do that. And after a certain time, my white lady would come. I called her my white lady, the Pleidian that was with me. But she actually, her name is Uru. And so she came, and after a while, she comes and says, "It's time to go." And I found out that apparently our physical human body can only still stay so long up there, and then we have to come back. Otherwise we have health problems. Yeah.
Her name was Uru.
I spell it Uru.
Yeah. Do you think that she was your guardian or handler even from a childhood?
Yes, she was in charge of me. Every time I'm being taken up there, she's always there to. And they get to be over 1,000 years old, so our little 80 years doesn't matter that much. So yeah, she's in charge of me ever since. I've always there when I come up, and another time that was very interesting. We were maybe about something 10 years old. We had to sit on a table, and in front of us got 5 glass jars, little. Every jar was a little taller than the one before, a little bigger. And every jar had some different colored jelly in it. And so we were told to take our index finger and stick it into the jelly. And the first one was green. So, I took my finger and stuck it into the green jelly. And as I did that, I was transported like a green rolling hill landscape. I can feel the sun shining on me. I can feel the grass under my bare feet. It was beautiful. And then way in the distance, I saw like a little farmhouse. It was really nice there. I was looking around, and then I heard up there, everything is telepathic. So you just hear the voice in your head. I heard the voice, pull out your finger. I pulled out my finger again and I was back at the table. And then we were told in very strict and uncertain terms, clean your finger. Make sure your finger is absolutely clean. We do not want any color contamination. So, because then we had to put the finger into the next color. And that was orange.
Orange, did you
No,
say?
no, the next one was yellow. Yeah, from green we went to yellow. And that one was really strange because I was like in a yellow cocoon. It was, but it was big enough so I could move around, and it was like being in a balloon inside a balloon. And the walls were flexible. I could push against the walls, but I couldn't find any way to get out of it. It was really strange. And then all of a sudden, I pushed on the left side, and there was another hand pushing from the other side. And that was Pearlie. She was pushing from the other side. And that was a strange one. And then we pulled out the finger again. And the next one was the orange one. And the orange one, I was on a planet, describe it, it was maybe like Mars. It was all orange. The whole atmosphere was orange. And it was barren and nothing was growing. And I didn't like it at all. It didn't feel nice. And on the right-hand side, I saw kind of a little hillside. And there was an opening. I'm going to go in there. I don't like it out here. So I walked towards it, and when I got close to it, I heard the voice in my head, "Do not walk into that. Do not go inside. Pull your finger." So I pulled my finger out again. And then after that was the purple one. Curly and I, we decided, okay, this time we're going to do it together because we wanted to be together. So we went 1, 2, 3 and put our finger into the pearly jelly, and we were in the universe. And that was cool. We were floating in the universe. We held hands because we didn't want to float apart. We held hands and we were just seeing all the stars and the nebula and everything. That was gorgeous. Pulled the finger, and then the last one was blue, and the blue one was underwater. And that was cool. We were swimming underwater and we could breathe and it was no problem. Yeah, that was also awesome.
And did you see a lot of creatures underwater as well?
Yes, there was a whole bunch of creatures coming by, and we held hands while we were just floating.
When you and Pearlie put your fingers in the jello together, was it in the same jar or did you
No,
separate
we
jars
just did
together?
we just did 1, 2, 3, and we went
In your separate jars?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same time.
Who was directing the class there? Was it a grey?
No, it was a Pleidian.
Okay.
It was a Pleidian that was directing it. The little grays are more like, I would say, biological AIs, artificial intelligence. They're like the worker ants there. If the aliens or the bigger ones, if they want or need something, they just send the signal out and then the little grays come and bring it. And I think they are also the ones that come down and take me.
Can you tell us something, Barbara, about the different species that you've seen on board the Pleidian ships? Because there seems to be a whole range of different species.
Yes, there are. Yeah, a lot of them are working together. And actually, I've met 2 humans.
Two humans and what? I missed that.
And we know each other from the ship.
Oh, okay.
We found out. Yeah, that is a kind of interest.
Describe some of the other beings. So we've got the Pleidians, we've got the
We've got some Arcturians that they have kind of a bluish skin. Then we have the little grays, we have the reptilians, and then there are some taller grays, which are maybe about 5 feet, a little smaller than me, and they're from Zeta Reticuli. And then we have taller ones that are maybe about 6 feet. Then we have very tall ones.
And the 6-foot ones, what do you know what their different roles are?
The 6-foot, I don't know where they're actually coming from, but they work on the ship. So you can see them. There's a huge room on the ship that's like has all kinds of workstation. One of the humans that I met in California, lives in Sausalito, Mark Moore. He worked on one of those stations when he's up there. Yeah, and there's all kinds of hybrids also working there. And however, I have not seen a mantis up there. I have not on that ship. I haven't seen one of those.
Were there many reptilians working there?
Not too much. You saw them here and there, but not too much.
And did those guys have tails?
Yes, yes. They have very long fingers, and very long nails, and only 3 fingers and a thumb. And when they touch you, they are very careful not to hurt you. Very, very gentle, the one that is always there when I think. And he's been there every time for more medical things.
So, Barbara, just continuing with your childhood adventures in other spaces, in other dimensions.
Yeah, that was really cool. But there was another one that one time we were taken up, and our whole group, we were taken into a laboratory or something like that. They had glass containers, and they showed us creatures from different planets and smaller creatures, and that was fascinating too. It was like one that looked like a little dragon. It had like the scales on top and the front feet, but the back had a very wide sail that had 3 sections to it, 3 roundish sections to it. And then there was one that was like a little hamster in the front, but no ears though. And in the back it had a shell. It was living with the back and the shell, and a very tiny, very long, skinny tail coming out of the back. And strange things like that. It was fascinating.
Small creatures?
Smaller creatures. It was a glass container, You were, look at this one, look at this one. There were actually times that I had kind of missing time periods. The one with the glass jars. I was visiting friends, sent there for summer vacation, friends of my mother's, and they had a girl just a year older than me, and she still was in school for a few days. And in the afternoon, after lunch, I went in the backyard. They had like an orchard coming from Berlin. We didn't have very many fruit trees there. And so I told my aunt, I said, I'm going to go in the back. And the next thing I know, I wake up on a cherry tree and the sun starts setting. And so I jump up and run into the house, and they were all excited. Where have you been? We've been looking for you. Where have you been? And another missing time incident happened when I was 13. My sister and a friend of ours, we lived in Canada at the time. My parents immigrated to Canada, to the province of Quebec. We lived in a little town right close to the mountain range. So the 3 of us, every other day, we would go up the mountain a little bit. They had those very big, lush blueberries in the summer, and they were so delicious. So we used to go up and pick blueberries. And one time too, we went up, and next thing I know, I was lying in between the blueberries. So I sat up and said, "How did I get there? 13 years old, you don't just fall asleep. What happened?" And so I sat up, and I heard my sister and the friend calling me, and I said, "I'm over here." Then they came running over and said, "Where have you been? We've been looking for you for 2 hours." And at that time, I was 13. I just gotten my period, and they took me up, and that was the first time I got physical examination. I didn't like that at all. And my white lady, she just patted my shoulder here and said, "You've changed now. You're becoming big. We just want to make sure that everything is okay." So I could understand that, so I let them do their thing. Later on another session, we went back to that incident, and I found out that's the first time they took things from me.
Now just getting the era 1956, I think.
Yeah.
So my goodness, they started kind of young with you.
Apparently I was ready. I don't know.
Did you see other youngsters up there at the time you were being examined?
Not at that time, no. From then on, we didn't have any contact. But I found out the girl Pearlie that I always played with, she lives actually now in Las Vegas. She is Misha Johnston, and she lives in Las Vegas. She had a very, very trying childhood, and she also does hypnotherapy. Last year we were on a seminar cruise ship to Mexico, and then in my cabin we sat and she hypnotized me, and because we wanted to find out things.
And did she realize who you were?
Well, the thing was, when we met at a UFO conference. We right away connected, like we knew each other. We found out, yes, we know each other.
fascinating stuff. And so at 13 years old, you were in Canada, and then you had some other events as you come back to Germany or California. I'm not sure where we go first.
Well, my parents went back to Germany, and my father did a very good job at Siemens and things like that. So we moved back to Germany, and I didn't want to stay there, So anyway, I met my future husband there. He traveled around the world, and I waited for him for 3.5 years, and then he came back, and then we took off for California, San Francisco, and first 3 years, and then after a year and a half, we got a Volkswagen camping bus in Germany, and we drove all the way the west coast of Africa down, all the way down to Cape Town and to Rhodesia back up, which is north of Dublin. It was a year and a half. It was very fascinating. Went on the dugout canoe up the Niger swamps and things like that to book too.
Yes, really exciting adventure there. Did you have any events whilst you and your husband were traveling?
We had some events, like we were going through the Sahara Desert and there's no road. We just went by compass, 400 miles south and then a little west, and we hoped to get there. So you have to work your way through the desert, and a few times we got stuck in the sand. And one time we were stuck up to the windshield in sand, and you dig 10 times and then you get dizzy because it was so hot. We had plenty of water with us, so that was good. That afternoon, a car from the north came and a car from the south, and they met exactly where we were stuck. I mean, they could have gone a quarter of a mile right or left, and they would never have seen us. It's one of the things that was arranged from up there. They made sure that we were getting help. A few other times that happened. In the Chobe National Park, we went down there and they kept wild animals away from us.
Was your husband ever taken as far as you know?
He was not taken, but I think they probably froze him,
Do you remember being taken whilst you were traveling?
I don't remember. That's the thing. I don't remember anything. I wish they would give me some, even now when I'm taken, I wish I could just know after the fact.
Yeah.
I got myself a dog camera, a night vision camera, but just stops working. And then the next morning I know I've been taken.
And you've mentioned that you've woken up with quite a lot of different marks on your body.
Yes. Ever since I worked with Yvonne Smith, she said, document everything. Take pictures of everything. And when you see the pictures afterwards, you realize how strange some of them are.
And I'd just like to kind of remind everybody that Barbara is 80 years old and had her download at 75. So you know what? It's never too late.
One of the major things, at the time I was 36, I had 5 miscarriages. 5.
That's a lot.
And so we wanted to have one child. First, I was pregnant. I was all excited. And at the end of the 3rd month, maybe the beginning of the 4th month, I had my first miscarriage. And it was very, very painful and a lot of cramping, a lot of blood. And then finally the little fetus, the little clump came out. I was like for 6 hours in the bathroom. And so I went to the doctor afterwards and checked everything out. And he said, well, we don't scrape out. But that was a real miscarriage. And then I got pregnant again. My husband said, oh, let's just try another one,
You were trying to have at least one child. That was what
exactly.
What you planned.
And so the next one was in the 3rd month. And that one was different. It was like I went to bed in the evening, I woke up in the morning, went to the bathroom. Maybe there was a little cramping, but not very much. And was a little blood, but nothing else. And went to the doctor. And everything was clear and everything was just cleaned out. They didn't have an explanation, and the doctor just said, well, let me try it again, the 3rd one. And then after the 3rd one, it was the same thing. Then in the evening, wake up in the morning, just little blood, and that was it.
Was it just as if you'd never been pregnant?
I don't know, but there was no placenta or anything left in there, nothing, After the 3rd one, they started testing us, the DNA and the genes are compatible and what have you. But then we had the 3rd one and the 4th one. And after the 4th one, all of those strange ones. And then finally, I got my son here. And the hypnotic regression, actually the first miscarriage, was induced by the aliens because they knew we just wanted to have one child. And they wanted to harvest me. They induced that one, and under hypnotic regression, I was lying on the table, and my white lady was standing beside me, patting my shoulder, and started reading. I said, what are you doing? She said, oh, it has to be done, it has to be done. I guess they have their agenda, That was part of that.
And was that painful? Was it uncomfortable?
Yes, it was very painful. And when she put her hand on my left shoulder, I think she had some kind of energy because as soon as she did, the pain would lessen. They had well, not the first one, that was just induced, but on the next one, when they took the fetus, they had an elongated tool, an instrument, I guess. It was just like a grayish instrument and it had a blue line on the side and it was flexible. That was inserted and then I can feel it work around my uterus and everything. I can feel it work. And then eventually it pulled out and it had the center with the fetus inside. And then it was rushed out. There was always somebody standing by. As soon as it came out, they rushed it off because they were put into a wall with glass bubbles. All the fetuses were behind that.
And who was doing the extraction of the fetuses?
That was the reptilian.
Oh, the reptilian was doing it.
Yeah, he was always the medical being there, and he was doing that, but very, very careful. And then there was some Pleidian, or maybe it was a hybrid, but it was a taller human-looking being coming in and brushing it off. And that was when I was up there. Then the next one and the next one, the third one, I said, no, not again. And I asked the white lady, what happened to my babies? And at that time, she said, okay, come with me. And we walked that hallway along with the glass bubbles, and then we turned right. There were some long grayish things hanging from the ceiling. I don't know what's in there. They weren't big enough for human beings to be in there or anything like that. There were a whole bunch of them hanging. We walked through those and we came into a room that had the babies hanging from the wall in sack. I would say in ours when they were 8 or 9 months old for pregnancy. That's how and the umbilical cord went through the roof. I guess that's how they got fed, hanging there. So we walked through this room.
Barbara, were there many?
Yes, many, rows and rows of them. My guess was around 100 of them or so. Seemed like in the wall, once they get bigger, then they were taken out and put in those sacks. We walked through some of the rows, and towards the end, she pointed to one and said, this one is yours. And I put my hand on the sack, and I can still feel it. It was really strange. It was warm, of course, like body temperature, I guess. It was warm. You can look through it. It was kind of a brownish, orangey. You can see through it and see the baby in there. It was like the texture was a little bit like velvet, but also like skin sort of. It gave, and it was flexible, and it was really strange, the feeling. And I put my hand on it and I gave all my love into that little creature there. I said, time for you to go. You have to go.
With your experiences of the fetuses being taken, the miscarriages, what sort of time frame was there between one and another?
They were pretty close together, like it was 3 months, and then maybe there was a month and a half or so that I started to be pregnant again. Under regression, I found out that I was artificially inseminated. So all those were hybrids.
Oh, right. So none of those were your...
No, none of them were. The first one that they induced, that was our own.
Right.
But that one, the others, I was artificially inseminated. It was taken up, and then after 3 months, take the fetus.
Did they give you any information about the kind of species you were being inseminated with?
They said all Pleidian, and I asked her why they're doing this, and she said where she's coming from, the Pleiadian. Well, in the Pleiadian star system, there are various planets inhabited, but where they are coming from, the women are barren. And some of the males still have sperm. And she said they are very compatible with humans. So that's why they do that, to keep it part of their race. So you've
got, how many hybrid children do you have that you know of?
I have 4 hybrid children, 3 girls and a boy. Septi, Rafti, and Kamu are the 3 girls, and Jaw is the boy. And Jaw, I see at times when I'm taking up on the ship, I've seen him at times up there. He works on the same ship. Septi and Rafti are on a different planet. They are also using the hybrids to populate some other planets. And Kamu is more like me, round face. The others have elongated faces. She has a round face and dark hair, and the others have like white and a little bit off whitish hair. And she's working on a different ship.
And do you have the same kind of emotional link to those four hybrid children as you do your earthly son?
Yes, yes. When they were small, I was taken up at times, and that was very fascinating for me too. I was taken up. They were like 4 years old. They were very close together, so that in basically 14 months or so, I had 4 children. So they were playing together. But what the aliens do on the ship, they keep the children from one woman, like a family together. They grow up together and they know their brothers and sisters. And I was taken up to a room and there were the kids playing. And so I sat down with them and we played together. And Jaw, the boy, is a very inquisitive one. And so one time he asked me, he said, on your planet, he said, how do you get from one point to the next? I said, well, if it's far away, we fly. But if it's closer, we have roads and cars and bicycles. And they couldn't understand that at all. There was no concept that they had any of it was something they could not understand. They just knew I was from Earth. My white lady came in and she said, it's time to go. So I stood up and the kids stood up and then I gave them all a hug. So they've never had a hug before, so I hugged them, and then the first one, the next one, and then the first one stood in the back again and wanted another hug. So she said, no, that's it. We have to go. Yeah, and that was interesting. I also found out one time that my Earth son was also taken up one time that I know of. And with me, he was about 4 years old at the time. We were living in Germany. So we went up there and he came into the room with the 4 children, and they had like light orbs they were playing with. They were bouncing them around, but not with their hands, but with their energy, so they can bounce them around with their energies. And they were playing in the room when we walked in. And so I told my son, I said, these are your siblings. And he didn't understand that because he didn't have any. The other kids came over and they were fascinating with him because he had curly hair and they all have straight hair. They had curly hair, so they touched his hair. And then they gave him also a sphere to play with. Right, but his earth energy was different. He couldn't use his energy to bounce the ball. It didn't work. So then he got so frustrated, he threw it down, and then we see the ball bouncing, and higher, and then to the wall, and to the ceiling. And the other kids just looked at it and said, wow, this is cool. So they all threw their balls down, and pretty soon we had 5 light spheres bouncing all around the room. It was crazy.
And does he remember that as an adult?
Well, that was one of the things that came out under hypnotic regression.
Okay.
The thing is, when you're under hypnotic regression, it's like you're being there. You're reliving all of that. It's so much fun.
Just to clarify, does your son on Earth have any memory? No, he doesn't know.
And right now, he also doesn't even want to know about it because he's, he just started with his family. He said, Mom, he knows that I'm basically doing, but he said, I don't want to know any details. So I'm not talking to him about that. I say I'm going to a conference or I have a podcast tonight or something like that. No details. Yeah. I think I would have been ready when I was 40 either. He was born 3 weeks before my 40th birthday.
Fascinating. Let's whiz forward to about, I can't remember if it's 2016 or 17. This is back in America when you had a missing time.
Oh, yeah. And that was before I knew any of this. I lived in Northern California, about 3.5 hours north of San Francisco. I had a dentist in Tijuana in Mexico. So 2-3 times a year, I would drive down and buy implants, and it was a lot cheaper than it was in the US. So I would drive down. It was always to San Diego, about 12, depending on the traffic, 12 to 14-hour drive. I would drive down on Sunday and then had my They came across the border, picked me up at the hotel, and then took me over to the dentist and brought me back. And then on Monday and then on Tuesday, I would drive back. So one time I was driving back San Diego through the LA area. And then from LA, if you go north, you have to go over they call it the Grapevine. It's a mountain range. And you dip down into the big valley, where Sacramento is and all that, all the way north. So I come down to the mountain, and I remember Highway 99 turning off. I was on I-5. And the next thing I know, I'm near Stockton. And Stockton is about 3.5 hour drive away from the last thing I remember. How the heck did I get here? I can daydream on I-5 for all that time, right in the middle of traffic again. Until normally when I come over the Grapevine, I had to, within the next 50 miles or so, I had to gas up or anything, I don't know. And that was really strange. Just you put it behind you because you have to go on living. You can't just wonder about it. But it was always kind of in the back bugging me. There was something. So we went to that day, and that was fascinating. It took me off the freeway in the middle of the day with my car up there. It was like the room looked like a hangar. And I was standing beside my car, looking around, and I heard Mo's voice, my white lady's voice in my head saying, "Wait there, I'm coming. Just stay there, I'm coming." So I'm standing there, and I see towards my right, there were 2 Pleiadians and 2 reptilians, and they were leaning over looked like a tabletop, was lit from underneath. And they were leaning over it, and I could understand their conversation. They were talking about a different planet. I was really excited. I can understand them over there. I thought it was really neat. Maybe my enthusiasm transferred, and one of the reptilians noticed that I was tuned into them. And I said, "No, no, 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 no." And then they cut me off. I don't know how they do that, but they cut me off. And then my white lady came, and she said, "Okay, just follow me." And we went into a room, and I was told to sit down and pull up my hands on the leg on my left side. Then a little gray came in that looked like a piece of cloth, but like a sponge. It was spongy and yellow. And they put that on my knee, and it started working. Like it didn't hurt or anything. It was more like a massage on my knee. After a while, and then they took it off. Oh, and then they put me back into the car. 2 days later, I had an appointment with the doctor. I was supposed to have surgery on that knee. Well, that was a pre-op checkup, And she said, "Oh, it's all getting better, and I don't think we'll postpone that surgery. I don't think we have to do that right now." So they healed my knee. It's always swollen, and
If it was swollen, you'd have been limping and in pain, I guess.
yes, well, that's what I was when I went down there too. But it was my left knee, so
Has your knee been okay since that time?
yes, I'm still walking on it.
That,
No problem.
that is absolutely great. So that's 2 big healings that you've had. You've been in your 70s then.
73, yeah.
Yeah.
But I had another healing too. I was interested in Sasquatch, Bigfoot. At one time, I had a session with Kevin Ryerson. He is a channeler. He channeled for Shirley MacLaine at the time, the actress. He lived in San Francisco, and I had a session with him one time. And the entity that came through, Atun Ray, was a Nubian priest in the old Egypt. I asked him once, because one time I had a really strange, it was a dream because it was during the daytime. I felt like I was in the body of a Sasquatch, standing in a cave that was higher up on the mountain range and looking over the treetops. And I had a baby in my left arm, walking back and forth, and I could actually feel the baby suck on my breast. And I was waiting for my mate, and on the right-hand side in the cave there was moss, leaves, and confetti. And that was so vivid for a minute, and then it was gone again. And so I asked this entity, "Have I ever been a Sasquatch in a prior life?" And always said, "One moment, please." And then he went to your Akashic records and came back and said, "No, but when 500 years ago you lived where I was living at the time in Lakeville in Northern California, And he said you lived there, and there was a sacred area, and you were the caretaker there. And the Sasquatch, you were friends with Sasquatch, and as a matter of fact, they used to drop off their kids, and you took care of their kids. So I was interested. So I was interested in Sasquatch, and in Chivela, in the state of Washington, they had a Sasquatch conference.